Welcome back, Canadian Baseball Network fans, to the Canadian Baseball Network podcast. This is an interesting one, Jackson. We're doing it a little bit differently today. I was recently at the Canadian Futures Showcase, where the top 150 Canadian high school players were at Rogers Center to put their skills on display for college recruiters and professional scouts. And we caught up with a bunch of different people, and we're going to kind of piece those clips together in this episode.
Yeah, a little something different from us. Obviously, Matt, you had a chance to go there, and it's a really cool event. It's grown a lot, as we'll hear in this episode over the last decade or so. It's a great opportunity, right, for kids to get to play at a big league ballpark and get to show off their stuff. So, appreciate you. I'm sure listeners also appreciate you trekking all the way downtown to do that. And what was kind of the vibe overall there? I'd imagine with 150 players, there was a lot going on. It was pretty busy, but take us there a little bit. What were some observations you made?
It's always exciting to watch these kids play on the big stage. You obviously watch the Jays play at Rogers Center, but to see high school players, and I caught up with Greg Hamilton, who was one of the guests that we're about to hear from. But just to see some of the players now in the big leagues that competed in this event, it's pretty cool and pretty special to be able to see them right kind of from the high school level, and then obviously watch them develop throughout. But I spoke to a couple different people, and this event may be the highlight of some of these players' careers. And there's nothing wrong with that. For others, they'll go on to play college baseball, others, the pros, and again, potentially the big leagues. But it's just an exciting time. A lot of the top coaches, there's the scouts all over the place, college recruiters. You can sense the excitement from the players. Their families are there. You're traveling from all over Canada, right? West Coast all the way to East Coast. So it's not something that a lot of these guys get to do all the time. So it was fun.
Yeah, you caught up with, I gotta say, a lot of movers and shakers at this event, Matt. You were busy, but you got started with TJ Burton.
Yeah, TJ Burton, I guess now former tournament director. He's taking another position in Ottawa with the Ottawa Canadians. But yeah, he really touched on some of the guys that kind of caught his eye, where this tournament has gone over the last 10 years, because this was also the 10th anniversary. Yeah, and he had a lot of great things to say. All right, we're here with TJ Burton. Can you just kind of give me your overall impression so far of this year's event?
Yeah, I think it's been tremendous. Scout turnout's been incredible. We've got, close to 50 scouts here. I'd say 30 from collegiate and 20 to 25 from major league teams. So, that's a huge goal for us, is to get as many scouts in the building. And, these young players have done a great job of showcasing themselves. The arms have been kind of the talk of the tournament, I think, so far from a velocity standpoint, and just, stuff. So all exciting stuff, but, it's just been a great 3-4 days so far, and everyone's having fun, and we're really showcasing Canada's best.
Are there a couple guys that have stood out so far? You mentioned some of the arms. Are there any that kind of jumped off the page to you early on?
You know what? There's been a lot of kids that I think, and it's always I've said this a couple times this week, there's been some kids who came in here kind of under the radar that I think are kind of making names for themselves, and that's my favorite part of the tournament every year. You always have the 4 or 5 that you highlight coming in. And you know what? I think those guys have done a nice job. Like, Sean Duncan the other night was pretty special. And but I think just all in all, people have stepped up to the occasion, and there's a lot of good stories that have come out. And we still got 2 days to go.
So this is 10 years of this event. How has it evolved from 10 years ago to now? What are kind of the biggest changes that you've seen?
Well, we went from definitely from a talent perspective, it's totally different. Like the floor is so much higher than it was 10 years ago.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's attributed to the programs across the country and the work they're doing. I think so many programs now are taking a development first approach, as opposed to maybe how it was back in the day, where it was kind of like, let's just get out and play as many games as humanly possible. I think now we're starting to back up a little bit, and we're really focusing on, hey, the fundamentals and getting stronger and getting bigger and getting reps. And so for me, I think it's the programs across the country really focusing in on development. And I think the work that the Blue Jays, Baseball Canada, and key stakeholders are doing across the country is really helping things.
So this 5-6 day event, obviously it's very important, tons of scouts here. How much do you think, when you speak to scouts and recruiters, that guys can elevate their stock while here?
I think it's a great event for kids to elevate their stock, in the sense of, like, this is actually a genuinely event where they're playing against their peers. I even see, like, with the junior national team, a lot of times that can be a tough thing to gauge for some scouts, because you're playing professional talent or high-level college. Like, these are actually their peers, right? So I think the ones that stick out in this event, you can clearly identify. It's like, okay, they are the best at their age. And I think that really shows things, right? Because I think it shows the collegiate guys, like, this is what they're going to look like as a freshman. And, for the pro guys, it gives them that good starting point of where they can project from.
I'm sure you're always thinking of ways to make it better and more and bigger. What goes into a planning an event like this, and where do you see it going down the line?
The planning really comes from year over year, is right when the event gets done, is sitting down and kind of talking about, what were things that we didn't do this year that we'd like to include, and what was kind of the talk amongst the players and the coaches, and what was their feedback, and really taking that in, and then really like looking at ourselves in the mirror and thinking like, maybe this way is easier for us to actually activate and do it, but is there something we can do? It might be a little harder on our end, but it'll make things better. So I think it's just constantly getting feedback, evaluating what we're doing year over year, and making sure what we're doing is the best and the best for the kids.
Yeah, a lot of great things to say from him. He's been around this tournament more than anyone as the director. But yeah, he touched on Sean Duncan, just committed to Vanderbilt. So that's no small feat for the left-hander from BC.
Wow. And sheesh, a Vanderbilt commitment. That's quite something. That's quite the opportunity. He also talked about how it's a good chance to play with and against peers, right? It's a really good opportunity for these scouts because, with the national team and just in a variety of settings, sometimes I guess it is hard to get that sort of level playing field, and you've got this really good opportunity to do that. You mentioned cross country, like anyone from the East Coast, from up north, from out west, like it's not just an Ontario focused thing. And I think that's huge because if you've primarily played, maybe you've been dominating the competition or whatever, and it's hard for scouts to get an understanding of like, okay, where does this player really stand? I think this showcase does a good job of, dare I say, leveling the playing field a little bit.
Absolutely. And just back on Duncan recently committed to Vanderbilt. I heard from multiple people at the event that LSU made the trip to see him.
Wow.
See him pitch. So that just kind of shows the magnitude of this event. Somebody coming all the way from Louisiana to watch a young Canadian left-hander pitch. So again, Sean Duncan's going to be a guy to watch going forward. But yeah, absolutely. Back to your point, I think, guys from Saskatchewan, the Prairies, the Maritimes, out west, they don't always get the chance to play against players from Ontario. And a lot of these programs do a good job of going to tournaments in similar places, and they may come across each other and guys on the national team and whatnot. But it really is a unique experience, even off the field, for these guys to be around each other, form friendships, and kind of, grow that tight-knit bond that is Canadian baseball.
Like you said, like even if this is it, that's quite the place to be. Get a chance to share your stuff at a big league stadium. I think it would just be such a feather in your cap just to get picked. I understand, it's you want a lot more than just to get picked for a showcase, but it's quite the honor, I'd imagine, for a lot of these kids. You take it real seriously as a result.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the tournament, the last day, there was a prospects game that certain guys that got picked. I believe it was picked by recruiters and scouts and coaches there. They were on Team Encarnacion and Team Batista, coached by those two guys. Something like that is something that these guys are never going to forget, regardless of how far they go in baseball.
Yeah, it's sort of like the top prospects game a number of years ago when they used to have Orr and Cherry coach the teams, things like that. I think that, like you said, it's a good opportunity to just enjoy the moment, whether you are going to Vanderbilt or not. Really cool that way. Kind of building on that, you caught up with Les McTavish. He talked a lot about kind of preparing players and how to embrace the moment, right?
Yeah, it was great to catch up with Les McTavish. I've spoken to him a couple of times, but to get him at this kind of event, and he was obviously coaching one of the teams and coaching different players than he normally would at Boxall. But I wanted to talk to him a little bit about how he prepares his players for playing in a setting like this.
I don't know if there's a cookie cutter approach to it, but you try to prepare them for and encourage them that there's going to be nerves and excitement, and sometimes that works for you and sometimes it works against you. But I try to just say to kids, whatever happens, enjoy the experience, have your eyes wide open, make sure you look around, and because you may never get back to this spot again, right? And but take it all in and don't take it for granted, and try to put your best foot forward. And I guess on the coaching side, you just say, hey, take a deep breath and try to be yourself, which is tough to do sometimes in this environment, for sure.
Are there nerves just from a coaching perspective when you get on a stage like this, around people like this?
Not as far as coaching. There's so many good people here, and they all treat each other real well, and I've been fortunate to be part of this every year. The coaching guy, you have more nerves for players that you've been around or that you coach, or when you see somebody really struggle, that makes it tough as a coach because there's nothing you can really do. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, certainly there is some nerves, and it's more you just want all the kids to do well.
Yeah, absolutely. How has the recruiting game changed for high school level players, and how does this kind of enhance that for them?
Well, collegiately?
Collegiately, yeah, or professionally, I guess either or.
Yeah, I think certainly on the college side, there's just so many really good players in the country right now. Like the level of talent over the last 10, 12, well, it's the 10th year, but with missing two with COVID, the level of talent is incredible. Where it's went to today. There's so many good programs, and I look at the province of Ontario. There's so many really good players in this province, and it's exciting for Canadian baseball, and it's just fun to come and watch everybody showcase their skills and talents.
Yeah, and a great insight there from Les as far as getting guys comfortable with playing on this sort of stage and making sure that they just enjoy the moment and feel confident when they arrive at Rogers Centre.
It's got to be hard, right? You got to find that balance between like enjoying the moment and embracing it, but also like, I'd imagine I'd be so nervous, right? You just want to do a good job. You're trying to get a commitment. You're trying to get, whether it's pro scouts, whoever, just to get looks at you, right? Especially as you said, if you're from somewhere like, you're from the prairies, you're from West, you're just from an area that Maritimes where you didn't have a lot of these opportunities. It must feel like this is my one shot, or this is one of my only shots to really prove myself. So I think that Les's words there must be so critical to a number of prospects. Just relax, enjoy it, and kind of let things play out how they will. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think regardless of how far a player goes, and we've spoken to high school, college, professional players, this is an experience that they're going to look back on and maybe, wish they took a little bit more time to enjoy it potentially. So I think having a message of doing that in the moment from someone that's been so involved with Canadian baseball is really important and something that they should have taken to heart.
Yeah, and you talked about how much it's grown in the last 10 years. You asked him about that, and like, sheesh, like there's just so many good players now, you mentioned, right, in terms of the recruitment and, especially in Ontario, yes, but I'd imagine countrywide. And it must be such a joy for people like Les and Greg Hamilton we're going to talk to see that growth, because not that it makes your job easier or anything, but it certainly helps when the players are getting better and there's a bigger talent pool, right?
That's the biggest thing that I think I took away from speaking to a lot of these people, Les included, and PJ Burton, and maybe conversations didn't even make it onto some of these clips, was how impressive the not only the ceiling is for a lot of these players. We already mentioned a guy like Sean Duncan, but the floor has been risen, which is really important when you talk about the overall development of Canadian baseball, that the guys that may be at the bottom of that 150, if you were to rank them, whoever would do that, are so much higher than it was 10 years ago. And that really goes to show the quality of these programs, Foxall being one of them, and how they're developing their players and getting them ready for college baseball, professional baseball, opportunities like this, whatever the case may be.
Get ready to kickstart your offseason at the Baseball Zone's exciting fall baseball clinics. With these specialized clinics, you can really focus on improving one area of your game, such as fielding and throwing, hitting, pitching, and fundamentals. TBZ is also offering semi-private clinics this fall featuring smaller class sizes, up to 3 players max. That's more time spent one-on-one with a coach, and the results, they'll speak for themselves. So, if you're ready to improve your performance this fall, get a head start in the competition, head to thebaseballzone.ca to learn more. And that whole thing of like focusing on development, not just winning games, obviously. And we've talked about that how many times in this podcast with so many guests about trying to find that balance and stuff. But you'd imagine that, the floor raising as much as it has would also be good for competition, right? And to get players even better. And then you're going to have players who are able to get to higher ceilings because they're just playing against better competition where they're from, right? And I think that kind of making our way now to Greg Hamilton, because obviously he's kind of overseeing the national teams, right, for Baseball Canada, the men's national teams. A guy like him who has seen kind of where, yes, high-end players come through, but just that floor rising, music to his ears, I'm sure.
Yeah, we had Greg obviously on the podcast for the
Mhm.
last baseball class. It was great catching up with him in person. But I was really curious on his perspective as far as how an event like this can impact a player and how people see him, see them, in regards to how they previously saw them, how much it can help them, how much a bad performance can hurt them. So I thought that was really interesting. So let's hear a little bit more about that. So we're here with Greg Hamilton. From your experience over the life of this event, how have you seen the development change and the skill level change?
I mean, it's certainly growing, from the initial stages. I mean, the environment is tremendous, obviously, and, when you come in as a scout and you have the opportunity to obviously watch kids in a Major League Stadium, but, the organization, everything's on time. I mean, it's just well delivered, and I think from the perspective of the talent level, I mean, it's growing, and across the country, and events like this create a demand, right? Kids aspire to do these things, which is a big part of growth and development in the game.
Yeah, so this is obviously one event in a long year for these kids, but I asked TJ Burton this: how can an event like this really elevate their stock? How much can that actually help them playing well on this stage?
I think it can help tremendously. I mean, obviously, just to come in here, you have to put yourself in their shoes to be that young and come in, and it's a stadium where they watch their major league heroes play. Like, it's one nation, one team, and to be able to come in and perform just in this stage alone or on this stage alone, shows you some things about kids, and you're also comparing, relative players to relative players, right? I mean, it's a catch-all tournament, so you've got everybody from coast to coast, and when you put them all on the same field, then it's a pretty good look for scouts.
For sure. So from a junior national team perspective, how does this event help you? Well, obviously recruit for the junior national team, but also put guys on the map and maybe follow down the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. Obviously, there's the immediate and then down the road, and again, you've got multiple classes of players here, right? You've got kids basically from grade 9 all the way to grade 12, so you can look at players that, that look like they're ready to go right now, and the guys that we would invite to sort of begin the cycle or the next cycle, and then you've kind of got your follows going forward because you've got all the different ages, different classes in here, so it really helps. I mean, you build out a depth chart, you build out not only this year but the next 2 years, you get a pretty good head start on everybody.
From a personal perspective, you see guys like maybe Bo Naylor, Josh Naylor, Mike Soroka on this stage, and then you get to see them pitch in a big league atmosphere like they were here. How rewarding and cool is that, just from a personal?
Yeah, I mean, you always love to see guys, get their start and then move on and succeed at the highest levels of the game. So it's very special when you see that happen, and it's, you kind of smile and you're happy for them, and obviously they're incredibly talented players. You kind of, you talk about this venue, you saw that when they were here, and you kind of knew that they separated themselves from their peers, and in a way that obviously the futures were bright, and it's great to see them do that.
Stock's a big thing in this game, Jackson, and any sport, and it can rise and fall, like the temperature here. But it's interesting to see an event like this when you're surrounded by 150 of the best players in Canada. Yeah, this is going to help your stock if you play well. Is it the be all end all if you don't play well? Absolutely not. But it certainly doesn't hurt to play well on a stage like this.
Yeah, like I'd imagine if you're kind of like we were talking about, like if you haven't had a lot of opportunities to play in a showcase like this, get a lot of big looks. And you are able to perform, like, holy cow, with that must you also, like, yes, your stock, but also I'd imagine your confidence, right? Like as a player and people's confidence in you moving forward. And I liked his point about being able to see kind of like the now, right? When building his team, but he's also looking well ahead to fill the depth chart, right? Like you never know. Maybe your play at this showcase helps you out way down the road. You just never know how things might play out, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you go back to a conversation that we had with a guy like Walt Burrows. I mean, he's talking about a young Josh Naylor at 15 years old. Maybe a player at this event that's maybe a little younger, maybe not quite ready for the national team experience, caught the eye of Greg Hamilton, got his name written down somewhere. He comes back next year. Greg sees him at another event. And all of a sudden, that's kind of how these things can transpire for guys that may not be ready yet, but they put themselves on the map.
Yeah, it's like just continuing to get your name out there, but also like just being able to, yeah, like you said, keep your name sort of in the back of these guys' minds, right? And I guess it also brings up, I mean, you were able to catch up with a professional scout, right? A scout for the San Diego Padres, Chris Kemlo, and I'm sure one of numerous scouts there from major league clubs. And he talks about it, and we're going to roll the clip in a second, just about sort of that, taking notice of somebody and then continuing to follow them and how that is so important for a scout.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of their job, especially at the high school and college level when they're preparing for a draft that isn't for another 8 months, right? I mean, they're not going to be signing any of these kids on the day of, but they got to be out there watching them and kind of setting the benchmark, even if this is the first time they see him, and then they follow him throughout the winter time. And a lot of these programs have scout days and all that sort of thing. And obviously the summer schedule, spring summer schedule next year heading into the draft. So some of these guys are already on the radar, obviously, the bigger name guys. But, you look at a guy like Owen Gregg last year, played in this event and he signed a free agent deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. So those things do happen. And anytime you get to play in front of a professional scout, you want to put your best foot forward.
It's always such a fun story, right? Like it's obviously with the Jays connection there, it's just so perfect, right? But any story like that is wonderful, and it's cool that we're getting more and more of these out of this event. But I'd imagine, Matt, that for a scout, it'd be pretty hard given that there's 150 players, like going about kind of whittling those numbers down to a group of players that you really want to watch more of.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about Chris about that, and we're going to hear about it just in a second. But yeah, it's a good point. 150 players that are the best in Canada, according to the people that selected these rosters. You go to a college game or a high school game, a lot of times the guy or two you're looking at for, whether it be the draft or your college or whatever it may be. But it's a plethora of talent all in front of you over the course of 4 or 5 days. So I was curious how a guy like Chris and a scout kind of filters through that information that's right in front of them.
Yeah, no, good question. I think when you have this many guys here and this much talent and this much depth, I think it's just important to just kind of take it all in one game at a time and try to collect as much information and just put it together and just start identifying guys and just start kind of putting a list together of guys you want to continue to follow.
What are kind of some of the things that jump out to you that make you want to follow somebody as a young player?
People that look like Chris LaRue. No, I'm just kidding. Aside from just like the tools and talent, like just players' makeup, their character, how they go about things, how they handle themselves, how they carry themselves on the field. For me, that stuff goes a long way.
For sure. What happens from here after this tournament? Say you see a couple guys that you like. What's the process like after that?
Yeah, just kind of continue to follow them and take it in the spring and go from there.
Really good to hear from a scout and a guy who has obviously seen a lot of different players in a lot of different settings, and how they really treat this event, yes, to see the tools and the talent, but I like this comment just about the general makeup, right? How they kind of carry themselves out there, work ethic. It's like that old line, like someone's always watching, right?
Yeah, and I think trust me, I played college baseball, I played high school baseball for the Terriers, I coached. That saying is true. I mean, I've seen college scouts watch the way a guy reacts to a strikeout, to a bad play. They watch body language. They watch what you're doing in between innings. That's a real thing. And for that can sometimes make the difference of what catches someone like Chris's attention. Obviously you have to have the tools to be able to play, at the professional level in this case, but there's all sorts of things, all kinds of eyeballs on these kids. There's a lot of pressure on these kids for sure. But if they can't handle it at this level, it's hard to be able to project them to handle it at the next level.
Really cool conversations you were able to have with some of these guys. And I liked how there was like some consistent themes in all of them that, like, yeah, the floor has risen in this tournament, this event. It's gotten a lot better. But also just like the amount of people that are around there feels like that grows every year. Like just the overall buzz. There's a sense of like a buzz around the showcase now. It hasn't always been the case. I guess final takeaways from you, Matt, like from the event, what you saw, if there's anything that stood out to you.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is the level of talent obviously is the big one. The commitment from coaches and evaluators and development people and media to cover the event. We were fortunate to have Centennial Sports Journalism students cover the game. So it's really just a huge team effort. And the Toronto Blue Jays, to be quite frank, they do a great job of putting this event on. Helping put this event on, supporting the event, obviously hosting at Rogers Center. So it's just a great opportunity. It was something that wasn't available to me. Not that I would have been selected to participate in something like this, but I would have loved to have the opportunity to potentially participate. So it's something it's a memory that's gonna last a lifetime for a lot of these guys, regardless of how far they go in their careers.
I was just gonna say, great memory and hopefully a springboard to potentially opportunities. But beyond that, yeah, and you just it's gonna be funny to see, some of these kids that come through who maybe didn't have a lot of stock, and then all of a sudden they have a great showcase and they build on it. Next thing you know, maybe one day we do see a future Mike Soroka or a Josh Naylor or a whatnot. That's really exciting, I'd imagine. So, yeah, we really appreciate you listening to this fun little recap of the Canadian Future Showcase. For Matt Betts, I'm Jackson Farrell for Canadian Baseball Network and the Baseball Zone. We'll catch you next time. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out Canadian Baseball Network for extensive and comprehensive coverage of the latest in Canadian baseball. And the Baseball Zone, Canada's leading instructional baseball academy and training home to thousands of MLB pro, college, and youth baseball players.